Reverend Jackson Podcast.
How you guys doing today, man? I'm very appreciative of everybody that support my channel, that subscribe to my channel, that leave cash apps in the channel. And I know on this platform, normally we talk hip hop, we talk sports. We may indulge in politics a little bit, but I want to say something about the election that really sparked my interest to create something like historically speaking, like talking about the people in the past, in the 60s and the 50s, in the black community that was intellectual individuals. As I look at the landscape of 2024, so many people and so much of our youth and the people that's in their 40s like me are only interested in entertainers and athletes. The intellectuals has been put to the wayside. My opinion. That's just my opinion. And I would like for y'all to leave in the comment section some modern day intellectuals, some modern day people that are intelligent, that spent their life researching and solving problems and trying to fix things and learning, a lifelong learner. And the reason that I'm interested in this at this point in my life is because I keep burping on these shows for some reason. Because like in my life, I grew up in impoverished communities. I grew up only focused on entertainers and athletes and people that seemed like they were successful. And I felt like I was led astray. And now I want to come to a point in life to where the rest of my life, I just want to learn and become more knowledgeable. And for some reason, I'm happy doing that. And I feel empowered when I know things. It empowers me more than finances could ever empower me. Just learning. And this individual we're going to talk about on this episode is James Baldwin. He was a hell of an author. He was an impactful person in the civil rights movement. He was, I don't want to use that. I just want to read. I don't want to say that for some reason because it has a negative thing to it. He was a part of the LGBTQ community, but he never spoke and claimed it. But the people in the streets knew around that time. And, you know, being a part of that movement during that time, it wasn't even called that, but being in that light during that time, people would have pushed you away. He was fighting for rights for him. Now, I think that they have went above and beyond with the LGBTQ movement and forgot about certain individuals. And everybody deserves equal rights, even though we're not all equal and we're not all the same. And some of these rights can be abused. But just let me read his Wikipedia, man, right quick, so I can tell y'all a little bit about him if you don't know anything about James Baldwin. You never heard of him. So Baldwin returned to the United States in the summer of 1957 while the civil rights legislation of that year was being debated in Congress. He had been powerfully moved by the image of a young girl, Dorothy Counts, braving a mob in an attempt to desegregate schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where I'm located at if you're new to this channel. And Partisan Review editor Philip Rove had suggested the report on what was happening in the American South. Baldwin was nervous about the trip, but he made it interviewing people in Charlotte like Martin Luther King. The results was 2 essays, one published in Harper's Magazine, The Hard Kind of Courage. The other in Partisan Review, Nobody Knows My Name. Subsequent Baldwin articles on the movement appeared in Harper's The New York Times and The New Yorker, where in 1962 he published the essay that he called Down at the Cross, and The New Yorker called Letter from a Region of My Mind, along with a shorter essay, The Progressive. The essay became the first next time. While he wrote about the movement, Baldwin aligned himself with the ideas of the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee. Whew, nonviolent, boy. Here we go with that now. Joining CORE allowed him to travel across the South, lecturing on racial inequality. His insights into both the North and South gave him a unique perspective on the racial problems the United States was facing. In 1963, he conducted a lecture tour of the South for CORE, traveling to Durham and Greensboro in North Carolina and in New Orleans. During the tour, he lectured to students, white liberals, and anyone else listening about his racial ideology, an ideological position between the muscular approach of Malcolm X and the nonviolent program of Martin Luther King Jr. Baldwin expressed the hope that socialism would take root. The hope that socialism would take roots in the United States. Interesting. By the spring of 1963, the mainstream press began to recognize Baldwin's incisive analysis of white racism and his eloquent descriptions of the Negro's pain and frustration. In fact, Time featured Baldwin on the cover of its May 1963 issue. There is not another writer, said Time, who expresses with such poignancy and abrasiveness the dark realities of the racial fermented North and South. In a cable Baldwin sent to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy during the Birmingham riot of 1963, Baldwin blamed the violence in Birmingham on the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, Mississippi Senator James Eastland, and President Kennedy for failing to use the great prestigious of his office as the moral forum which it could be. Ooh, let's get into the conversation, man. Let me play the first clip, man. Moral authority.
But 20 years later, the moral authority which was present in the Negro Northern community when I was growing up has vanished. And people talk about progress, and I look at Harlem, which I really know. I know it like I know my hand. And it is much worse there today than it was when I was growing up.
Would you say this is true of the schools too?
It's much worse in the schools.
What school did you go to?
I went to PS 24, went to PS 139.
We are fellow alumni. I went to 139.
And I didn't like a lot of my teachers, but I had a couple of teachers who were very nice to me. One was a Negro teacher. And I remember, you ask me these questions, so I'm trying to answer you. I remember coming home from school, and you can guess how young I must have been. And my mother asked me if my teacher was colored or white. And I said she was a little bit colored, a little bit white, because she was about your color. And as a matter of fact, I was right. That's part of the dilemma of being an American Negro. That one is a little bit colored and a little bit white. And not only in physical terms, but in the head and in the heart. And there are days, this is one of them, when you wonder what your role is in this country and what your future is in it. How precisely you're going to reconcile yourself to your situation here, and how you're going to communicate to the vast, heedless, unthinking, cruel white majority that you are here. And to be here means that you can't be anywhere else. I could, in my own person, leave this country, and I could go to Africa, I could go to China, I could go to Russia, I could go to Cuba, but I'm an American.
But I'm American. That clip intrigued me from that conversation that he had. And next time after I play the clip, I'm going to post a link and everything and tell y'all when the conversation took place, where I was at, who was the interviewer and everything like that. So y'all can know where to get it from. Because that conversation isn't on YouTube. It's on a website. And I'm going to post a link to it, though. But what was intriguing to me about that is that moral authority. And that was 1963. The people that's in authority, the people that's in public office, do not use their position for moral purposes. And then he said he can go to different countries. He can go to different places. He said he had a teacher that was a different shade than him. But if the people that was in power was using their authority for morally correct things, they could just promote and say that we're all Americans, no matter what your color is, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background is. We all are American first. But the country can't abide by those standards and those ways of thinking. And I think it's due to capitalism and classism. That's just my perspective. I could be wrong. But the reason I say that is because capitalism has no moral compass. Capitalism has to have a class, a upper class, a middle class, and a bottom class for it to operate right. So the people that's in authority, if they abide by capitalism first, then they can't have a moral compass because it's about the classes and about the finances over the human experience. Now we're going to get into the next clip because this is important to me. If you're a young individual watching this podcast, man, I appreciate you being here and you wanting to learn and further your life experience and knowing your people or whatever. I don't expect this show to get a lot of views because, you know, people only want to be entertained. They don't want to be informed or they don't want to learn about the history. Black History Month also is like, it's starting to fall and it's not interesting as it used to be because people don't care no more. Folks' concerns, when I was thinking, I didn't talk about the election. Folks' concerns was about sex rights and my body and LGBTQ stuff. It wasn't about the empowerment of the whole of the people. Black people don't even care. Like people that's LGBTQ and they're black, they identify with being LGBTQ before they identify with black because LGBTQ look like it's winning and black look like it's losing when you're both at the same time at the end of the day. Let me play the next clip. Defined by circumstances.
The only Negro school principal, as far as I know, in the entire history of New York was the principal. It was a woman named Mrs. Eyre. And she liked me. And in a way, I guess she proved to me that I could, that I didn't have to be entirely defined by my circumstances. Because you know that every Negro child knows what his circumstances are, though he can't articulate them, because he's born into a republic which assures him, in as many ways as it knows how, and has got great force, that he has a certain place and he can never rise above it. And what has happened in Harlem since is that generation has passed away.
Mrs. Eyre was a sort of a model, in a sense.
She was a proof. She was a living proof that I was not necessarily what the country said I was.
And it is significant, Jim, that we do not have a single Negro principal in the New York public school system today.
And it is not because there ain't nobody around who can do it, you know. One's involved in a very curious and a very serious battle, concerning which I think the time is going to be as explicit as one can possibly be. The great victims in this country of the institution called segregation, which is not a Southern custom, but which has been for 100 years a national way of life. The great victims are the white people, the white man's children. Lorraine Hansberry said this afternoon, we were talking about the problem of being a Negro male in this society. Lorraine said, But she wasn't too concerned, really, about Negro manhood, since they had managed to do and to endure and to even transcend some fantastic things. But she was very worried about a civilization which could produce those 5 policemen standing on the Negro woman's neck in Birmingham, or wherever it was. And I am too. I'm terrified at the moral apathy, the death of the heart, which is happening in my country. These people have deluded themselves for so long that they really don't think I'm human. I base this on their conduct, not on what they say. And this means that they have become, in themselves, moral monsters.
He kept talking about morals. You know, I want to talk about the take that he had on defining my circumstances. But before I want to get to that conversation, I want to talk about the segregation piece. Because segregation, I think that it was more beneficial and it was better to me than to integrate. Looking at it now over time. And the reason I say that is because when you're segregated and you're doing without, you're dealing without, you always figure it out on your own. When you integrate and you get pacified and you have an expectancy that people are going to take care of you, you get lackadaisical, you get lazy, and you stop fighting. And that's where you are today with people that's only intrigued with entertainers and athletes. Now, back to why I think the intellectual part is important and people need to continue to learn their history, become more knowledgeable, become problem solvers, instead of people that's just using money to put things to the side and letting finances fix it. It's because, like, when you look at the state in 2024, the things that's really making money in this country, it's not a lot of us involved. You know, in the tech world, this thing that is exploding, I don't see too many black people owning AI software or tech companies or apps that's making billions of dollars. I don't know who. Put me in the game, y'all. Who own an app, a $1 billion app, as a black person? Who owns an NBA team that's black besides Michael Jordan? They barely even, like, they don't want to put us in leadership positions. That's what I'm talking about. That's why I think that folks have to spend their life learning on why these things are happening. In the NFL, they barely want us to be head coaches, let alone owners of a team. Let me get to the next point, because I could go on and on about that, the intellectual part. And why it's so important to continue to learn, because I'm kind of frustrated at the end of the day, because I would love to be able to help brothers out financially. I would love to grow internally with some people I grew up with, but we can't even come together for a sandwich, let alone come together for an idea. We can't come together for nothing. And it really bothers me at the end of the day. It bothers me. A person won't even, man, let me get off of that. So, defined by circumstances. You are not who they say you are. That's all I'm going to say about that. You are not who they say you are. You can be whatever you want to be. You can choose to do whatever you want to do. It's just that you are not who they say you are, man. You are whatever you want to be. Let's get into the next clip, the breaking point.
Now, we all knew, I know you knew and I knew too, that a moment was coming when we couldn't guarantee, that no one can guarantee, that it won't reach the breaking point. You know, you can only survive so many beatings, so much humiliation, so much despair, so many broken promises before something gives. Human beings are not by nature nonviolent. Those children had to pay a terrible price in discipline, in moral discipline, and an interior effort and courage which the country cannot imagine, because it still thinks Gary Cooper, for example, was a man. And I mean his image. I have nothing against him, him.
You said something that you cannot expect them to remain constantly nonviolent.
No, you can't. You can't. And furthermore, there were always, these students that we're talking about, a minority. The students we're talking about, when I was in Tallahassee, there were some students protesting. But there were many, 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 many more students who had given up, who were desperate, and whom Malcolm X can reach, for example, much more easily than I can.
What do you mean?
When Malcolm tells them, in effect, is that they should be proud of being black, and God knows that they should be. And that's a very important thing to hear in a country which assures you you should be ashamed of it. Of course, in order to do this, what he does is destroy a truth and invent a history. What he does is say, you're better because you're black. Well, of course, that isn't true. That's the trouble.
Do you think that this is an appealing approach, and that the black Muslims, in preaching black supremacy, seek to exploit the frustration of the Negro?
I don't think, put it as simply as I can, and without trying now to investigate whatever the motives of any given Muslim leader may be, it is the only movement in the country which we can call grassroots. I hate to say that, but it is true. Because it is only, when Malcolm talks, or one of the Muslim ministers talk, they articulate for all the Negro people who hear them, who listen to them, they articulate their suffering. The suffering which has been in this country so long denied. That's Malcolm's great authority over any of his audiences. He corroborates their reality. He tells them that they really exist, you know?
Jim, do you think that this is a more effective appeal than the appeal of Martin Luther King?
It's much more sinister because it is much more effective. It's much more effective because it is, after all, comparatively easy to invest a population with a false morale by giving them a false sense of superiority. And it will always break down in a crisis. It's the history of Europe, simply. It's one of the reasons that we're in this terrible place. It's one of the reasons that we have 5 cops standing on a black woman's neck in Birmingham. Because at some point they believed, they were taught and they believed that they were better than other people because they were white. It leads to
a false sense of superiority. You know, if he was, because I wasn't alive during that time, and listening to some of his speeches, I never heard that him speaking was giving black people a superior motive. Black folks knew they wasn't superior during that period to me, just by me looking at the things, or it could have been altered to make it look worse than it actually was. But to me, seeing houses get burnt down, churches get burned down, people getting hosed by the fire trucks, you knew you wasn't superior during that time. So if he was even saying those things, I don't think that it resonated with the majority of people, because they could have died, man, by feeling and thinking and acting that way. But let's get to something that he said that really caught my attention. And we're going to get up out of here. I'm going to play one more clip and I'm going to get up out of here. But I hope that this was something interesting to y'all. And we're going to have another one come up before the weekends. And I'm going to do more of this speaking on historical people in our community. So what caught my attention is that humans are not nonviolent by nature. So humans are violent by nature. Is that an excuse for people that is violent or want to react with violence? Is that an excuse for them? so we can sympathize with their actions. I Google something, and this is an AI overview. You know, if you did the update on the iPhone, they give you an AI overview of everything that you Google. I'm not saying this is right, but this is what the AI overview says. According to most experts, humans are not inherently nonviolent, but rather have the capacity for both violence and peace, meaning our nature is not solely defined by aggression. Our social and environmental factors significantly influence how we behave, allowing us to choose peaceful actions as readily as violent ones. Our social and environmental factors significantly influence how we behave. So, if you put me in an environment where it's lack, where it's violence, where I'm hurting, where I'm suffering, where it's not peace, how you expect me to react? I'm gone, man. You know, in my life, it took me a long time to have a peaceful environment and to accept that that's the main thing that I want in life. And I had to remove family. I had to remove friends that only wanted to talk about things that wasn't beneficial to me, that wasn't beneficial for my soul, and to obtain this level of peace that I have now. And your environment plays a part. I even had to leave the city that I'm originally from. Your environment has so many factors on how you behave, how your life will turn out, and how you'll react to things. And it's powerful. Protect your space, protect your peace, so you can react in a way that you will flourish in life. Thank y'all for tuning in, man. Peace, love, plenty, abundance. Make sure you go get you some money, and I'm gone. Chill.
Well, I'm both glad and sorry you asked me that question. I'll do my best to answer it. I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive. To be a pessimist means that you have agreed that human life is an academic matter. So I'm forced to be an optimist. I'm forced to believe that we can survive whatever we must survive. But the Negro in this country, the future of the Negro in this country is precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country. It is entirely up to the American people and our representatives. It is entirely up to the American people whether or not they're going to face and deal with and embrace this stranger whom they maligned so long. What white people have to do is try to find out in their own hearts why it was necessary to have a nigger in the first place. Because I'm not a nigger. I'm a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need him. And the question you got to ask yourself, the white population of this country has got to ask itself, North and South, because it's one country, and for a Negro, there is no difference in the North and the South. There's just a difference in the way they castrate you. But the fact of the castration is the American fact. If I'm not the nigger here, and you invented him, you the white people invented him, then you got to find out why.
Well,
and the future of the country depends on that, whether or not it's able to ask that question.
as a Negro and as an American, I can only hope that America has the strength and the capacity,
The moral strength,
to ask and answer that question.
the Trevor Jackson Podcast.